All right, today we are going to be doing one of my favorite lessons, and we're going to be talking about multiplying binomials. You're going to get to meet one of my favorite math figures today. So when we talk about multiplying two binomials, and I mentioned here we're going to use this FOIL method. I'm going to walk you through each step, but basically we're going to take a binomial, so two terms, and multiply it by another binomial. So this is very different than adding and subtracting or even our power rules. There's a whole method we need to remember how to multiply these two binomials. So I'm going to break down what FOIL means, and it's really going to help you understand and kind of follow a process for solving these types of problems. So when I talk about FOIL, it's kind of a mnemonic device to help you remember what to do. So we're going to take our first two terms multiplied by our outer two terms, then our inner, and then our last. Okay, so let's pinpoint what that means. So if I rewrite the two binomials I wrote at the beginning, I'm going to take the first two terms in each of those binomials, okay? So my first two terms, I meant to mention, this is going to be four different distributions. So when we talk about distributing, we talk about multiplying, okay? So I'm going to multiply the first two terms, then the outer two terms, then the inner, and then the last two terms. So a lot of people make a mistake and think they're just going to multiply x times x and then 2 times 4, but that is big no, okay? There is actually 4 multiplication steps that need to be happening here in order to do this correctly, okay? All right, so if I take my example here, in order to do this correctly, I'm going to take my first two terms, which would be x times x. So x is the first term in this binomial and the first term in this binomial. Then I'm going to look for my outside or my outer two terms, okay? So if I look way out here and way out here, it's going to be x times 4. And then I'm going to take the two terms that are on the inside, okay, so here and here, and multiply those together. And then I'm going to take the last term of that first binomial multiplied by my last term in the second binomial, okay? So it can get a little bit confusing. That's why FOIL really helps us. And oh my goodness, there he is. He's just so adorable. Do you see him? Binomial Bob, that's what I call him. Do you see his little nose and his mouth and his eyebrows? Oh, he's just adorable. So if you see Bob after making these distributions, you know you've done something correct, okay? So let's do a couple different examples. So my first, I've got the binomial of x plus 5 times the binomial of x plus 8. Anytime I see these types of problems, I just write FOIL on my paper to make sure I do 4 different steps, okay? So I'm going to do my f, first two terms, so x times x. Let's figure out what that would be. X times x, if we remember, we're going to add those exponents. Each of those x's has an exponent of 1. So I'm going to add 1 plus 1 and get x squared. That's why we practice those exponent rules so much for things like this, okay? Then I'm going to take my outside two terms, which would be x and 8. Those are both on the outside of the problem. So x times 8 is going to be 8x. Now you wouldn't write it as x8 because 8 is my coefficient, okay? So always write the number in front, so it's kind of keeping a pattern there. Then I'm going to take my inside two terms, which would be 5 times x, and that would give me 5x. And then my last two terms, so 5 times 8. 5 is the last term in that first binomial, and 8 is the last term in the second binomial. So that's going to give me 40. Notice how I did multiplication. It's all multiplication when we distribute, okay? So if you've done it correctly, you should have 4 different terms, FOIL. Now, the very last step, I'm hoping that you notice something in this polynomial. In the middle, I have like terms, okay? I have 8x and 5x. Those are alike, so I can simplify this a little bit more. So I'm going to take 8x plus 5x, and that's going to give me 13x. This final step of combining like terms is going to be whatever this sign is. It might be addition, it might be subtraction, but in our case, we're going to add those together to simplify and get 13x. Okay, I'm going to then bring down my other terms to end up with a trinomial. Again, if you've done this correctly, your final answer should be a trinomial. I can't add any of those together because they're not like terms, okay? Let's look at another one. So again, I'm going to do first, outer, inner, last. So my first two terms are n times n is n squared. My outside two terms, n times 4 is 4n, so plus 4n. Make sure you have your addition or subtraction sign there. And then my inside two terms, I want to make sure I take that negative. So it's negative 7 times n is going to give me negative 7n. And then my last two terms, again, being very careful of my positives and negatives, I'm going to have negative 7 times 4 is negative 28. I've done everything correctly. FOIL. I've got 4 terms that I'm going to simplify by combining those like terms in the middle. So 4n minus 7n gives me negative 3n. I'm going to bring everything else down and end with a beautiful trinomial. Okay, one last one. I'm going to show you one that looks a little bit different because I have a coefficient in front here, which I didn't have in my other two examples. So very quickly, I'm going to take FOIL. So first is going to be 2y squared. So 2 times 1 is 2, and then I add those exponents, remember, to get me y squared. My outside two terms, 2y times negative 5 is going to give me negative 10y. Inside is going to give me 3y, and my last two terms are negative 15. I've got a nice FOIL, 4 terms. I'm going to combine any like terms that I see. Remember, they have to have the same variable to the same exponent, so it's just my y's. Negative 10 plus 3 is going to give me negative 7. Okay? I'm not going to do this one with you, but hopefully you have some good examples and are ready to do some practice.